All right, welcome back everybody to another Quad's Eye View. I'm Ben from 30 Foot Drop, and Quad's Eye View is where I give you guys a quadriplegic's point of view on an issue or an article of the day. So today we're going to have a look at an article that was recently printed in the Harvard Gazette, and it's entitled "Doctors Share Views on Patients with Disability." You'll find a link in the description down below. So let's have a read through and see what the Quad's Eye View is. Oh, well, this is a great start. This is a great start. Survey says most physicians associate disabilities with worse quality of life, a finding that many contribute to care disparities. So, this is, according to these guys, a first of its kind study survey, and they surveyed 714 practicing physicians from multiple specialities and locations across the country. This is in the United States. I'd be very interested to see something similar done here in Australia, just to see how well they match up, because we do unfortunately tend to mimic America at times. So we'll see. So here we go. More than 80% of US physicians reported that people with significant disabilities have worse quality of life than non-disabled people, an attitude that may contribute to healthcare disparities among people with disability, according to recent research published in Health Affairs. Wow. Oh, God, it'd be... yeah, okay. It's true. I covered in a previous video about how for many disabled people, our first introduction to disability is from people who don't have a disability themselves, whether that be through family, friends, doctors, medical personnel, etc., etc. And that can really be very hard to get that. But what they're saying here is that, the fact that these doctors and physicians have negative attitudes about patients with disability, it isn't surprising. They're not surprised by these results. But what does surprise them is the magnitude of the physicians' stigmatizing views, and they found it very disturbing. Here we go. Okay, so the person doing the study was actually diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 1980, her first year in medical school. Really interesting. Really interesting. Okay, so only 40% of surveyed physicians reported they feel very confident about their ability to provide the same quality of care to patients with disabilities as other patients. Look, in my experience, this is so true. I have given up going to just any old doctor because 19 times out of 20, I have to spend that long explaining my disability and everything to the doctor that I actually get nothing meaningful back. If I'm going there for an issue that I'm not sure of. And other doctors are just flat out uncomfortable and not sure what to do, which for somebody like myself isn't quite so big a deal. I've got a very in-depth understanding of my disabilities, and as a result, I can advocate for myself quite well. But not everybody has this depth of understanding. So you can imagine you're going to a doctor who's supposed to be a specialist, who's supposed to have a much more in-depth understanding of your issues, and you rock up and they actually have not much. Interesting. And just 56.5% strongly agreed that they welcome patients with disabilities into their practice. So under disability discrimination laws, we are to receive the same access to healthcare as anybody else. And this is great and all, but I will be upfront, honest and candid that there are many medical centres and doctors' offices around this area who are not actually accessible. which to me is really odd. They and when I say they're not accessible, one example I can think of off the top of my head, they have a ramp going up to the door. That's great, but they have a round door handle. And round door handles for anybody with dexterity impairments like myself, like I can't move my hand at all, people with rheumatoid arthritis or something similar, they are really, really, really hard to use. And the door itself is quite heavy. And so what they found as well in here is that most surveyed physicians did not give socially desirable answers about their perceptions of people with disability. And this indicates their certainty in their beliefs. We wouldn't expect most physicians to say that racial or ethnic minorities have a lower quality of life, yet 4/5 of physicians made that pronouncement about people with disabilities. This shows the massive assumptions and a lack of understanding of the lives of people with disability on part of the physicians, the doctors. Yeah, wow, okay, that's huge. That's massive. Give me a second to unpack that. With that assumption, does that mean that the healthcare system, because a lot of these specialists and that they're involved in the healthcare system as well and involved in the creation of these policies and procedures? That will it affect the healthcare system? Does it mean that? That's full on. They've gone on to say exactly that. Our results clearly raise concern about the ability of the healthcare system to ensure equitable care for people with disability. Oh, this is great. I've got to look up this this particular research because some of the stuff she's saying here is amazing. So for the paper cites the paper, which is the one this article is referring to, cites examples from the author's others papers and others' research demonstrating that individuals with disability often receive inferior care. Many surgeons assume, for example, that women with early-stage breast cancer who use wheelchair want a mastectomy instead of a breast-conserving surgery, believing that women with disability don't care about their appearance. Oof. And during the surge of the COVID pandemic in March, and I believe I've covered this in some of my blogs, when researchers such as ventilators were scarce, the Office for Civil Rights at the US Department of Health and Human Services felt compelled to issue a warning to healthcare providers that people with disability should not be denied medical care on the basis of disability or perceived quality of life. I remember that particular warning going out, and I was absolutely shocked. The argument is triage, right? Triage is trying to order the people into an order that will help to save and preserve life. Now, factors that can be put into there, or biases that can affect triage, is perceived quality of life. Now, if 4/5 of doctors are assuming that, or automatically assuming that people with disability have a lower quality of life, therefore that bias will affect the triage, which means that people with disability are at risk of receiving inferior care, meaning more people with disability are going to die, which is unfortunately not surprising and absolutely horrific. So the research, I like this. The research is a wake-up call for physicians to recognise their biases so they don't make massive assumptions about the values of patients with disability, thereby limiting their healthcare options and compromising care. I will be honest, one of my biggest fears around the pandemic and around any time that I have gone into hospital is that these biases that seem to that are amongst the entire of society are going to affect my quality of care. And in fact, it actually has impacted my quality of care in some cases. There has been cases where, as a quadriplegic, I can be affected by a condition called autonomic dysreflexia, which, if left untreated, I can stroke out and die. Now, it's a condition that's fairly isolated to spinal cord injury and therefore quite specialised. The hospitals in Australia do a really good job of educating patients about autonomic dysreflexia so that we can advocate for ourselves in hospital so that we get the right treatment for what we need. What I have found is that because of these biases around assumed quality of life and thereby the link between the bias of quality of life and bias of education and understanding, the links are there to show that they can be one and the same. I have been ignored a lot when it comes to this. And if not for my wife, who happens to be a nurse and was a spinal specialist before we moved away from there because dealing with it at work and then dealing with it at home. Anyway, so if she had not been there to advocate for me, there's a good chance that I wouldn't be here. So, yeah, these biases and this, it's real. It happens in Australia. And the truth is that these assumptions that we have this lower quality of life and that we view us, ourselves as having a tragic life, it's unfounded. And in fact, one of the studies that she's citing in here is exactly that. Studies of people with disabilities show that most don't view their lives as tragic. They've figured out how to get around in the world that wasn't designed for them and view their lives as good quality. And yeah, I do. I really do. So, what can we do about this? I have the utmost respect for people in the medical profession because you have to go through so much training and there's so much involved in it. Whether that be, from your highest neurosurgeons all the way down to the people who work as patient care assistants or what are they calling them now? Anyway, I have the utmost respect for all of them. So, what can we do about this? We could probably introduce some form of education and continuing education around disabilities and quality of life and the stats to try and get rid of these biases, similar to what we here at 30 Foot Drop are doing with the business community, where we're working with them to open their eyes to the reality of the situation, to show that just because we're different doesn't mean we don't have money to spend. So in the case of physicians, it would be, they use a wheelchair to get around, but that doesn't mean that their quality of life's bad. And it needs to happen. 4/5, that's a lot. According to the author, currently most medical schools don't include disability topics in their curriculum. So yeah, in future research, they plan to explore the extent to which the physicians' perceptions about people with disability contribute to the disparities in care. This is an amazing article. It sounds like an amazing study. I would really love to see something similar done here in Australia. I think that the results would open a lot of eyes. And at the end of the day, make life better for so many people. Not because they have a low quality of life, but because people will no longer have the assumption that they do. So what do you guys reckon?